The fluorescent lights of the Southeast District Station flickered ominously as Martin Green shuffled across the worn linoleum floor. His eyes were sunken, his face a canvas of defeat and desperation. As he approached the front desk, the officer on duty barely looked up until Martin's voice, barely more than a whisper, cut through the hum of routine police chatter. "I need to confess," he said, the words hanging heavy in the air. "I killed them." Detective Ava Collins was in her office, sifting through paperwork, when the call came through. The urgency in her partner's voice was unmistakable. "You need to get down here, now. We've got a live one." Within minutes, Ava stood before Martin, her mind racing with questions and doubts. Martin recounted his story with chilling clarity. December 18th, 2014 was the day everything changed. He spoke of Richard Larkin and Calvin Turner, his housemates, and how Calvin had allegedly ensnared him in an extortion scheme that spiraled out of control. "Why now?" Ava pressed, her pen poised over her notepad. "Why confess after all these years?" Martin's eyes darted nervously around the room. "I couldn't live with it anymore. Every night, I see their faces." As Martin detailed how he dismembered their bodies with a saw and disposed of them in various locations across Baltimore, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. No physical evidence had ever been found to corroborate his tale. Back at her desk, Ava reviewed old case files. Richard and Calvin had vanished without a trace in 2014, a mystery that had haunted the department for years. But now, with Martin's confession, there was a glimmer of resolution. Yet doubt gnawed at Ava's instincts. She contacted forensic teams to scour locations mentioned by Martin once again, hoping for any trace left behind. Hours turned into days as teams combed through sites. Meanwhile, Ava delved deeper into Martin's life, his relationships, his financial records, his mental health history, searching for inconsistencies or truths hidden in plain sight. Then came a breakthrough. An old voicemail from Richard to a friend surfaced, dated just days before his disappearance. In it, Richard hinted at a big secret about Calvin, something dangerous enough to make him afraid for his life. Ava's heart pounded as she played the voicemail again in her office late that night. The pieces of this twisted puzzle were starting to fit together, but not as she had expected. Her phone buzzed insistently on her desk, the screen illuminating with a call from an unknown number. "You need to see this," the voice on the other end urged urgently. "Now." As Ava grabbed her coat and keys, she could feel the weight of something monumental about to unfold. A truth that might change everything she thought she knew about this case. Detective Ava Collins's heart raced as she drove through the rain-slicked streets of Baltimore, the urgency of the unknown caller's message still echoing in her mind. The address she'd been given led her to a derelict warehouse on the outskirts of town. As she stepped out of her car, the wind howled through broken windows, carrying whispers of forgotten secrets. The caller had been insistent. "You need to see this," they'd said, their voice laced with an urgency that left no room for hesitation. Ava gripped her flashlight and entered the building, her footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. Somewhere within these walls lay answers or more questions. Inside, Ava's flashlight beam danced across the debris-strewn floor until it caught on something out of place. A stack of dusty old photographs scattered near a rusting metal pillar. She knelt down, picking up one of the images. It was a picture of Martin Green taken years ago, laughing with Richard Larkin and Calvin Turner in what appeared to be a happier time. The setting was unmistakably the living room of their shared house on Ralworth Road. Her mind replayed Martin's confession, his admission of dismemberment without evidence. Now, seeing these photographs, Ava wondered if these men were ever truly friends, or if their camaraderie had been a facade hiding darker truths. Back at the station, Ava spread the photos across her desk. She combed through each one, searching for inconsistencies or hidden clues. One photo showed Richard with his arm around the shoulders of a man Ava didn't recognize. His face was partially obscured by shadows, but there was something unsettling about his presence. "Who are you?" Ava murmured to herself, feeling an inexplicable sense of foreboding. As she scrutinized the stranger's face, her phone buzzed, a new message alert from an unknown number. The message contained only an address and a timestamp from December 2014. Ava's pulse quickened. The date matched the timeline when Richard and Calvin disappeared. Could this be where it all happened? Was this where Martin claimed to dispose of their remains? With no time to lose, Ava coordinated with a forensic team to explore the location. Meanwhile, she returned to Ralworth Road to speak with neighbors who might shed light on the dynamics within that house. Knocking on doors yielded little at first, hushed voices, closed curtains, but persistence paid off when an elderly woman down the street finally spoke up. "Oh yes," she recalled, peering through thick glasses. "Those boys were always so lively, but then things changed. Arguments, late-night visitors. I heard shouting more than once." A chill ran down Ava's spine as she imagined what those nights must have been like inside that house. The forensic team reported back just as Ava arrived at the mysterious address. Nothing but a dead end, another empty promise in this maze of deceit. Disappointment gnawed at her until another call came through. "The man in your photo," the voice said urgently over the line. "He was seen with Calvin at a bar just days before they vanished." Ava's grip tightened on her phone as she realized this could be the breakthrough they needed, a lead that might unravel everything they thought they knew about those missing years. Her mind raced with possibilities as she hung up and prepared for another sleepless night, chasing ghosts from Ralworth Road. The hum of the police scanner buzzed in Detective Ava Collins's car, the rhythmic sound a constant companion as she navigated Baltimore's shadowed streets once again. The unknown caller's words still echoed in her mind. The man in the photograph, seen with Calvin just days before his disappearance. It was a lead, perhaps the most tangible one yet, and Ava felt the urgency pressing against her chest like a vice. The bar they were last seen at was a relic of a place, with faded neon signs and an air of forgotten revelry. As she entered, the smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke enveloped her. She approached the bartender, an older man with weary eyes who seemed to have seen it all. "Tell me about this guy," Ava said, sliding the photo across the counter. His eyes flickered over it, recognition sparking. "Yeah, I remember him. He was here with that Turner kid a few times." Ava's heart skipped a beat. "Do you know his name?" The bartender shrugged, wiping down the counter with practiced indifference. "Went by Logan, I think. Didn't talk much." Logan. It was a name, a thread to pull at in this tangled web of secrets and lies. Back at the station, Ava dug into every database she could access, hunting for any Logan connected to Calvin Turner or Richard Larkin. Each keystroke echoed like a heartbeat in the silent office as the night wore on. Hours passed with nothing but frustration until finally a hit. A mugshot from a minor infraction years ago. Logan Wright. The face was unmistakable. It was him. The file noted an address not far from Ralworth Road. Ava didn't waste time. She coordinated with officers for backup before heading out into the night once more. They arrived at Logan's last known address, a dilapidated apartment building that loomed against the sky like a specter of neglect. As they approached his door, Ava signaled her team to fan out quietly. Her knock was met with silence at first, then shuffling sounds from within. The door creaked open, just enough for Logan's pale face to peer out, suspicion etched into every line. "Logan Wright?" Ava asked calmly, though her nerves were thrumming like live wires beneath her skin. He hesitated before nodding slightly. "We need to talk about Calvin Turner and Richard Larkin." His eyes widened slightly, just enough for Ava to sense fear lurking beneath his guarded exterior. Inside his cluttered apartment, Logan fidgeted under Ava's steady gaze as she began her questioning. "I don't know nothing about nothing," he muttered defensively. Ava leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut through his excuses like a blade. "You were seen with Calvin days before he vanished. You know something." His eyes darted around the room before landing back on hers, and in that moment of vulnerability, Ava knew she had him cornered. "I didn't want no part of it," he finally admitted. "Calvin, he was into some bad stuff." "Like what?" Ava pressed. But before Logan could respond, there was a loud crash from outside, glass shattering as shadows moved erratically against the thin curtains of his window. Ava's instincts kicked in as she reached for her radio to call for backup assistance while signaling her team to secure the perimeter. But even as they moved into action, there was an unsettling sense that this wasn't just an ordinary scare tactic. It felt orchestrated. Logan turned pale under the dim light of his apartment. Fear etched deeply into his features, now took on new dimensions, like a man who knew too much and realized he'd spoken too freely. As Ava tried to calm him down, her phone vibrated in her pocket, a text message from an unknown number. "You're looking in the wrong place again." The words sent chills down her spine, taunting yet informative, a reminder that someone else was always one step ahead. Ava gripped her phone in the flickering light of Logan's apartment, the threatening text still glowing on the screen. "You're looking in the wrong place again." Outside, officers scoured the street where someone had shattered the window and fired off shots. Logan slumped against the wall, eyes darting to the broken glass, his earlier attempt at revealing Calvin Turner's secrets abruptly derailed by fear. She eased closer, her voice low. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head, fingers trembling on his knees. "I didn't think they'd come for me like this." Ava glanced at the shards scattered around them. "Who's behind it?" Logan swallowed. "I only know Calvin was blackmailing someone, a woman named Rachel. Then she died or disappeared. I don't know which." Ava's pulse spiked at that name. Martin Green's confession about murdering Richard Larkin and Calvin had left many questions, but no evidence of any bodies. Now a rumored accomplice, Rachel Tompkins, was surfacing. Ava motioned 2 officers to guard the door while she escorted Logan out. Once he was secure in a patrol car, she turned to see her phone light up again with a new message. Rachel was no victim. That statement hammered at Ava's thoughts. Could Rachel have orchestrated something worse than what Martin claimed? She directed officers to stay with Logan, then hurried back to the station. In a quiet corner of the bullpen, she searched the system for any record of a Rachel Tompkins connected to Ralworth Road. Nothing appeared. It was as if the woman never existed. Frustration took hold. If Rachel played a crucial part in Calvin's dealings, why was there no paper trail? Ava pressed Logan for more details. He recalled hushed arguments and a threat from Calvin about keeping Rachel in line. Before he could expand, a call came through. A break-in reported at the Ralworth Road house where Martin, Richard, and Calvin once lived. Ava sped through the dark streets, mind reeling at the possibility of new evidence. It was well past midnight when she arrived. The front door had been forced open, lock splintered. She stepped inside, flashlight bobbing in the dusty hall. Her footsteps echoed on the worn floorboards. An officer pointed down a passageway. "Footprints in the debris, fresh. Whoever's here isn't gone." Ava inched forward, tension coiling in her chest. At the end of the corridor, a narrow door stood ajar. She eased it open and found a cramped room with scattered papers. Most were too damaged by time or moisture to read, but a single photograph lay face down on a battered table. Ava turned it over. Calvin stood with a dark-haired woman, both gazing at the camera, unsmiling. The handwritten caption read only Rachel. A scraping sound made her spin around. A figure darted through the hall. Ava gave chase, adrenaline spiking. She sprinted after the intruder, but by the time she reached the front room, the only sign of life was the sound of a window slamming shut. Racing outside, she found no one in the yard or on the street. The night felt charged with unanswered questions. She returned to the house, shining her flashlight onto that photograph. Rachel's face stared back, her expression inscrutable. Was she just another victim, or had she been the real force behind the extortion and violence swirling around Calvin and Martin? Ava couldn't shake a sense of looming peril. Someone was going to great lengths to keep Rachel's story hidden, leaving threats and breaking windows to silence people like Logan. Her phone buzzed again, and when she glanced at the screen, a final text glowed in the shadows. "You're not ready for what she did." The basement was a tomb of silence, broken only by the shuffling of feet and the occasional creak of old wood. Detective Ava Collins took a breath, steadying herself as the darkness pressed in. The documents she had uncovered lay scattered on the floor, each a potential key to the labyrinth of secrets that had claimed so many lives. Yet above them, danger loomed, an invisible threat drawing closer with every breath. The power flickered again, casting ghostly shadows that danced across the walls like specters of the past. Ava's heart hammered in her chest as she sifted through the papers, her gloved fingers brushing over financial ledgers and lists of names. Names she recognized from her investigation. Calvin Turner's world was laid bare in these pages, a world teetering on the edge of betrayal and desperation. She found a list marked insurance with addresses and dates meticulously recorded, each entry a whisper of Calvin's dealings, proof perhaps of Martin Green's claims. But there was more, a series of coded messages that hinted at a network deeper than Ava had anticipated. Her radio crackled to life, pulling her from the sea of revelations. Detective Collins, came the voice she recognized from her team leader, tense but controlled. There's movement in the alley. We need to secure this site. Ava acknowledged the call, but her eyes lingered on a final document, a photograph folded and worn. It showed Calvin and Richard together at some unknown location, but behind them stood Martin Green, his expression unreadable yet familiar. As she pocketed the photo, footsteps thundered above, the sound of pursuit or escape. Ava motioned for her team to cover the exits as she ascended from the basement's gloom into a night alive with tension. Outside, figures moved like phantoms through narrow alleyways, their intentions obscured by shadow and secrecy. Ava's instincts screamed caution. This was no longer just an investigation, it was survival. Her phone buzzed against her hip, a message from an unknown number. Time's running out. A cold reminder that their unseen adversary was still one step ahead. Ava's mind raced as she pieced together fragments of truth they'd uncovered. Logan's confession about Calvin's enemies painted a volatile picture, one that made Martin Green's confession seem less like madness and more like desperation. Suddenly, a shout erupted from down the street, followed by the unmistakable sound of struggle, a scuffle breaking out in the darkened heart of Baltimore's forgotten corners. Ava bolted towards the noise, adrenaline surging as she rounded a corner to find two figures locked in combat, one clearly an officer struggling against an unseen assailant's grip. "Stop," Ava commanded, drawing her weapon with practiced precision. But just as quickly as it began, the altercation dissolved into chaos. Shadows fled into shadows, leaving behind only echoes and questions unanswered. The officer staggered back, catching his breath while Ava scanned their surroundings for any sign of their quarry. Whoever had orchestrated this night's events wanted them chasing ghosts rather than truths. Returning to Ralworth Road under cover of nightfall felt like retreating into darkness without end. The basement now sealed while forensics processed Calvin's insurance. Yet answers remained elusive, hidden within layers Ava feared might never fully unravel. As dawn loomed on the horizon, painting skies with tentative hopefulness, all that remained certain was uncertainty itself, creeping ever closer, like morning fog over distant waters. Her phone buzzed once more, a final message before silence reclaimed its dominion. This isn't over. It wasn't just a taunt, it was a promise, a reminder that what lay beneath had yet to truly surface.